practiced it so many times, you guys. I was gonna sing Creed, and I can't do it. No matter how many times I tried. I did it like 5 times before this, and not a single time could I do it without laughing. Hold me now. And then one time I tried, with arms wide open, and I thought that would go better, but I tried. I don't know what to tell you. I giggled about it all the way home. Sometimes they get me. Sometimes they get me. Most of the time, I mean, Creed's fun, but like I can't do it without laughing. I broke character on Saturday Night Live.
I don't understand why you think it's funny. I'm feeling just completely lost. I'm like, God, I wonder what she was trying to sing. That's so funny. And I don't get it. I don't get the joke.
It's Creed. It's Creed. It's this you know who Creed is. That made it so much more funny.
I don't know.
Oh boy.
At the end of the podcast, you can explain it to me. Because, I'm older than you, So there's
Right,
probably a lot of
but
things that you understand
Creed
that I don't.
okay, there's a sound trending right now of a man that's like standing on the Grand Canyon, and he's just singing out into it, and people caught him. And it's a Creed song, and so the sound is going viral, but they were really popular as like maybe alt sort of grunge kind of band in the late 90s,
Yeah.
early 2000s. So you would have been like really focused on being an adult and working, and I was probably
Focused elsewhere.
I was in high school. Yeah, so we were
Man.
really I don't know why this has me so tickled. I think it's just a lot of memories of just being young and thinking that something is so cool. And then you go back and look at it and you're like, what what was I doing and what was I thinking? But it's pretty good music. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I
fact remains. The fact remains. So, and also, I think it was because I spent a lot of time thinking about what I just said to you on messages that um, we're not going to have my client on, a totally different client, because she's like, no thanks, I'm a behind the scenes girly. And I was like, okay, no problem at all. Like, she
sure.
was
Sure.
absolutely loved that we asked her and felt,
Yeah.
honored. But
Awesome.
so, yeah, so I think all the reason I was giggly was just to release everything I was also thinking about, which was the topic of behavioral euthanasia. I don't want to take everybody down that roller coaster ride just yet, but I don't know if that was some way that my brain was like, okay, because I had been kind of contemplating on it, and I've thought about it several times within the last, couple of weeks as well.
The topic.
Yes, the topic, the implications of discussing it, um, there's just so many little tentacles to it that make it very, very difficult to bring up. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
have like,
Yeah.
have a discussion that's not so nuanced on a specific case or whatever. But so I want to talk about it, but I thought about narrowing it down to something that happened with me personally. What happens when what you're seeing in front of you, you believe to be, and you have an educated, I mean, you've been spent weeks with this person, you understand the backstory, you've helped them through training. So this is your kind of towards what one would say the end of your journey together. And I don't really mean the end, but you've gone through all the things. And for whatever reason, this has happened to me a couple of times now, a few times. It hasn't always been this as the result, but it's the thing I struggle with the most with clients is when you as a professional look at a dog and you say to someone, I think given what I'm seeing, this is what we're dealing with, and this is the path forward. And it isn't really something that's that outrageous. Maybe it's the dog has mild to moderate reactivity. Maybe there's some resource guarding that could be changed with management. They're really very solvable things, manageable things for, and I would consider for maybe the average person even. What happens when you say, we can work on this, there's a path forward, and the person disagrees with you, and they there are many reasons that would happen. I'm going to throw out a couple of the things that I have heard. One of the things is just straight up fear. They are they have been through an experience with another trainer, and there's some belief systems set in, there's some, just prior things that they're bringing in with them as they come to you, and they really almost can't hear what you're saying, because the other trainers that they've been with, typically, this is typically, I'm not saying all the time, the other trainers that they have been with were generally balanced trainers that were really leaning into compulsion and misuse of
Mm-hmm.
tools. And it's very hard for them to let go of some of the things they were told and kind of understand really what they're looking at in their dog. And I've noticed that those people carry a profound fear with them that their dog is going to kill something. I mean, really. And I don't think it's irrational. I just think I've noticed that there's a correlation here. The other thing that I've noticed is when a dog, and let me finish that, and they can't get over the fear to move on to rehabilitation. So then the next one is a person where the dog is more to manage than their idea of what having a dog was, and their lifestyle and what they want out of a relationship with a dog is priority over managing that problem dog. And I'm not saying that with judgment. I'm just saying what I saw.
Yeah.
I don't have to live with that dog, so I don't think it's fair for me to be like, well, I wouldn't have chose that. I just want to have a discussion about how can we still be true to our moral and ethical code while understanding that our clients ultimately may disagree with us.
I think about this a lot
Oh, okay,
because
good.
we are, oh yeah, obsessively. And the thing that comes to me, I saw a video yesterday. It was disturbing. Some guy kicking his puppy, right? So it was ugly, and and they were basically they're looking for this person, for lack of a better word, right? And then I was thinking to myself, in the spectrum of ways that people see dogs, that is on the spectrum. So there's this one
Yeah.
edge, and then there's the other edge, which is there's no such thing as a bad dog. Live your entire lives around it. It's the center of the universe, whatever. Yeah. But I think about this a lot, and it's kind of impossible to know where the average person lies, because to know where the average person lies, you would have to know millions of people, and nobody knows millions of
Mm-hmm.
people. Not only do you need to know millions of people, you need to know them all over that spectrum, from kicking your puppy to turning it into your life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know what's average. I don't know how the average person sees a dog, and my scope is limited. Either one, as a dog, don't you do that. Yes, you. Um, and he looks at these huge green eyes. What? Me? Um, but so I know because I'm a dog trainer. I talk to people who are exceptionally dog focused, right? But that's not normal nor average. I know people who live in my neighborhood, but they're not normal or average either. They tend to be uh, older people with no more children and a fair amount of disposable income.
Mm.
That's not average.
Yeah.
So the ranch, the average mentality there is different. It's rural. And that's
Mm-hmm.
completely different than the urban.
Yeah.
And so I get to thinking about this, because if you don't know where people are starting, so what you said about people have a vision of what it is to live with a dog. And it can be everything from something you abuse to something you revere and worship. And then there's all this in
Mm,
between. And so when somebody says, at least they're being honest, right?
yeah.
That's not the vision I have of living with a dog. Or I don't think I'm good enough for that level of safety. There's no answer to that. I mean,
Yeah.
it is where they're at on their journey. And that is why I'm always saying to people, to
Hmm.
me, one of the most important things I can do as a trainer is help people fall in love with their dogs. Because I think when you fall in love with your dog, it's not that you want to do right by your dog out of obligation. You want to do right by your
Mm,
dog because you want them to be happy. And those are really,
mm,
I love watching my dogs run. It means a lot to me.
mhm.
I don't get up when the weather is bad and bring them out because I have an obligation. I do it because it's making them happy. And of course, there are always some things that are obligation, always, right? Like I really
Right.
don't want to do it today. And then I'm doing it just to get it done. Too many days like that, though, and I resent my dog. So that's
Yeah.
something to think about, yeah?
Hmm.
And so I think about this a lot. And I don't think that's right or wrong. I think all of these things, how you choose to see a dog, with the exception of abuse, just because I really believe that all beings deserve comfort to the best of my ability to provide that. But there's no right way to feel about a
Mm,
dog, right? I mean, is there some moral standard that we can apply? There are parts of the world they still eat dogs. I have no
yeah.
opinion about that. I eat cows and sheep. If I can eat cows and sheep, really, is there any true difference? No, there is not. The only difference is
Hmm.
cultural. So
Well, that's for sure. Yeah.
I see them as pets, and I have a different.
Hmm.
So I think that's so important because I would guess that the same dog in 10 different homes could get wildly different. Like one person would be like, I can't live with this, I have to euthanize, all the way to the other side of this doesn't even hit my radar, you know?
Yeah, and the dog's thriving, and
Yeah.
and fine, and then you can have, yeah, I all the time I tell people, like, if your dog was living in my house, that wouldn't be happening. And if my dog was living in Denise's house, he would have a much fuller life. Like, you get the in terms of training, you get the person that you get. You get the person you get, and it's true for dogs and it's true for people. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, that person realizes that they cannot care for you, and they put you into a situation. Well, let me rephrase that. They realize they can't care for you, and they either decide to give you up so that you may find something better, or have at least a chance, at something better, or they decide that that's not an option and they can't deal with the burden of thinking about you hurting someone, so they choose euthanasia. Obviously we can't do that with people, but, well, some states do.
We
Some
do prison,
states
life in
some
prison is
states do.
basically is our solution, right?
Yeah,
That we,
which to me
no.
is, you know a real punishment, to be confined for
Oh,
life. And I think about that too. I think about dogs. You hear about those dogs that have spent 365 days in the shelter. And I just think, what a rotten society. What a rotten society that a dog. Here's my opinion on it, and I know that people are going to disagree. Like me personally, I know there's implications to this, but I'm just going to say my gut reaction. I would rather open the door and let the dog run free in the woods than I would to see it. Like, something has really disturbed me recently. Gene Hackman's death. His his dog starved to death in that kennel. It's just another, I just, my dog is kennel trained, my dog is crate trained for a number of different reasons, but it's just so hard for me to think about him not being able to get out, or something happening to me and him not being. I do think about things like that, and I know that's it's kind of out there, but
yeah, but quality of, so you're just hitting on the quality of life. And so I'm going to tell this story. It's probably not going to go over well, but whatever. I have these turkeys on my property, and we started having a problem because they were getting in people's cars and literally running at people and their dogs.
Oh.
So I was like, okay, we have moved from entertaining, because they were hugely entertaining, to maybe dangerous.
Yeah.
Now, I could have put them on Craigslist and found homes for them. I also could have put them in a large cage. So I have a cage which is 10 feet wide by 100 feet long. Big cage. But they're used to running around the whole property. They have the whole property
Mm-hmm.
to themselves. 100 acres.
Mm-hmm.
They have high levels of stimulation all the time. They were happy. The turkeys were happy, and I loved watching them and all. I decided that I was not okay with putting them on Craigslist because I knew that they would go into a cage. And nobody
Mm-hmm.
has a cage as big as my cage. So if they're
Mm-hmm.
going to go in a cage, then they can go in my cage.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt I had two choices. One was butcher them, turn them into dog food, eat them, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Two was to at least give them a chance. So what I did is I brought them. I have a huge wooded area with a lot of wild turkeys back there in the back. And I said, I think this is the most humane option. You may die. I mean, I get that. Most wild animals do die early.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of the system. But God, let it be quick and done. And in the meantime, you're not living in a box. And
Yeah.
I would have made a different decision if they had always been kept in a cage. So I only kept them in a cage when I raised them when they were little, and I
Yeah.
let them out. And all my animals, as much as possible, are loose as much as possible in big spaces, because I just feel that it's so unkind to live in a barn or to live in a small
Mm-hmm.
space. It
Mm-hmm.
just feels so wrong. And so that was sort of, it is just a turkey. But the thing is that to me, it always goes back to all sentient beings that feel pain and mental anguish.
Yeah.
What can I do to minimize that? And my personal belief is that once death happens, that's not painful. So once you're dead, it's over. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is a good part of why I'm not a vegetarian, for example. I don't think killing something is painful. It's done. The suffering's over. We're all going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whether I eat it or the amoebas eat it, I mean, the bacteria eat it, I don't know that I get that that's much of a difference.
Yeah.
And I don't understand sanctuaries. I really don't. I mean, unless they're exceptionally high quality, I don't understand the keeping things alive. If there's a
I
reason it's a sanctuary, there's a reason.
I really encourage people to really look into sanctuaries that they may care to support. Or I just, after living in Oklahoma and working for an exotic animal vet, I just don't know the reason of why we would be keeping alive hybrid mutant ligers that are not even functional creatures, because they've been inbred and rebred. And it's just a strange that, I don't think that people should own bears. I think that's weird, so can you go and put that bear out in the wild, and can it live? I don't know. I don't know, but I just saw some things that were, the number of people that own primates is, I'm not sure the right word to use there, is astonishing. But I don't know how that's not a mental illness that's in the DSM, wanting to own another species and treat it like, literally like a child, when it's not in the best interest of that animal and they do not live like humans. It is really, really, really bizarre to me. But that's definitely a whole nother, it's a group of people, it's an underground group of people that do the primate thing. There's so many things in the animal world that I have learned to, while I may not do them or understand them, I can still have compassion for those people and help them in the way that I can help them. And the way that I could help them was by taking care of their animals, on the veterinary medicine side. And I felt like I did that, and that's a needed job. But yeah, the sanctuaries, it's just about human beings. It's human beings that don't want to euthanize animals. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to make it that simple, but it is much, much more about our feelings coupled with lack of regulation a lot of times around who can acquire said thing that's being euthanized. It's because if the bar is really low to entry, we're going to get a whole bunch of people, which in Oklahoma, in terms of exotic animals, there is no bar. So there you just walk right in. So you're going to get a lot of misuse and uneducated people doing something that has very little regulation.
So, about that euthanasia, it's
Yeah.
interesting how it mimics mental health stigmas is very much alive and well in our
Yeah.
society, right? And if you haven't been through some version, it's probably a little hard to understand how devastating it is. And what I tell people is, well, generally when people commit suicide, it's not because of physical pain, it's because of mental pain. And that gives me a very clear understanding of how much suffering is actually taking place.
Hmm.
But we don't think about mental suffering a lot. And maybe it's because your mental suffering might be different than mine. It's hard for me to kind of empathize with. It's
Yeah.
hard for me to visualize. Whereas all of us have been burned, right? So you
Hmm.
got burned on the stove and then you find out somebody's in the hospital and burned on half their body. It's very easy to be overwhelmed with empathy because your little tiny burn gave you a taste, you know?
Yeah.
With mental pain, I think a lot of us just really don't have a sense of how terrible it can be. And as a result, when decisions around euthanasia come up with pets, there's not a lot of, I don't find distress about people euthanizing pets for physical reasons. Like we support 100% and we get it.
Hmm.
But when it comes to euthanasia for behavioral reasons, mental reasons, it's interesting how we don't recognize the distress of an animal that's living incompatible with our society. Because if the dog you have is not compatible, I'm not talking about a reactive dog who displays walking down the street. I'm talking about a dog who's incompatible with our society, is considered a danger
Yeah.
in our society.
Well, a dog who chooses violence
Exactly.
regularly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be for any reason. It could be fearful, but at the end of the day, it's because the mental wiring on that particular animal is not aligned with what we need in our society. It's just interesting that we don't recognize, forget about the people for a sec,
Mm.
we don't recognize how much the animal itself is hurting. And so when you talk about like sanctuary or living uh, in a for months in
Hmm.
a kennel, unable to find a
Oh, it just,
home,
uh,
it's it's overwhelming to me. They don't live that long to start with. So if you keep a dog in a kennel for months and months, it's just like, wow, we that deserves some thought. And the whole, okay, if you want to save them all, what are you saving them from? All of us are going to die. All dogs are going to die. It's just, are you going to die today or in 5 years? So the idea of having a dog spend its life in a sanctuary until it has a physical illness, which is severe enough that people can now justify, oh, now we can
yeah, I
get rid
think
of
a
the dog.
lot of people haven't had the experience of being in a foster home or in the foster system or in a group home. I think that inner resilience is actually not as much as we really think that it is anymore. I think, especially in the dog world, a large portion of the people that are having conversations like this are the ones that are brave enough to have the conversations back and forth. I don't know. It's a very heavy topic, and I feel like people that have been through really, really overly difficult things should speak out more about the topic because I think we just don't have a judge of. I do think that resiliency is on a spectrum. I think you can improve upon it, obviously, but I just think that a large portion of people are not building that part of themselves. And so everything seems horrifying to them when in reality there is a spectrum. There is a spectrum of things that are really appalling to things that are just mildly annoying, and you don't know that until the really appalling things happen to you or you do them. There's only one way to have that perspective. And then you have to be willing to discuss it. And that is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of people. Perfect example of that, obviously, is me because I'm a person that discusses it. But a person that I have conversation about this a lot is my friend Madison, um, who has said this publicly now. But she learned to train dogs in prison, and she wasn't in jail. She was in prison for years, and I have the utmost respect for her when I ask her about really difficult like topics. I will actually generally go to her first because of what she went through and the way that she's been able to overcome that and be a functional member of society is so much more impressive to me than I graduated or like magna cum laude from Brown or something or wherever it. I've just realized like I really do need to be spending time close, in close relationship with people who have been through really terrible stuff and come out on the other side because their perspective about life is so different and the things that they say are so different and they're so moderate. Every one of them is just so in the middle of like, actually I see how that could be true and that could be true. I see your point of view. I see how you feel like that's effed up. I see how that hurts you and that may and I feel like a lot of the voices are people, a lot of the opinions that we tend to listen to may not have that experience. That was pretty specific experience, but something like that. I used to think that my opinion was less valuable in a room because of my background. And then as I got older, had more time practicing the principles of recovery and applying that to my life, I could see that most adults had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They had absolutely no idea what they're doing, and they were literally going through life just avoiding making mistakes, so that they would check the boxes, they would take the steps, they would do the thing, and they were trying to not make mistakes because that's what. And I had a very different style, obviously, where I just go do whatever and let the mistakes happen. And why is that? What would those two different? I learned how to not fear like negative consequences, failure, the feeling of being uncomfortable and not liking something and having to do it anyway, or sit with it anyway, or be quiet when I didn't. I was learning all of these things in recovery, and later I figured out that my friends would all they would come to me. They would come to me and they would ask me things and they would say things to me. And I realized like, oh wow, that perspective became so valuable. And those horrible things, oh my God, that happened to me and that I did, just horrible. They're all such an important part of me looking at someone and just letting them be, like seeing someone with an e-collar or a prong collar or whatever, I just let them be. And if I see something that I physically feel compelled, oh my God, I have to go over there, then I will. Then I will. That's just how I've always been. If I have to put my physical body in between you and what's going on, and something happens to me, and that's the way I meet my end, I am totally fine with that. I mean, statistical probability of that happening is low because of where I live, but still, like everybody's like, well, you could get this, or you could get that, or you could get hurt, or you could get, we're all gonna die. I mean, it's just the way that I feel about it, but I recognize not everybody feels that way. It just, to me, it feels a little bit like the voices that have the stories to tell are being drowned out by the people that just don't want to be uncomfortable. Maybe maybe I'm being overly sensitive about it, but
I don't know. It's actually really interesting what you said about being moderate. I'm very moderate as well. And you'd mentioned something a few weeks ago about everybody hates moderates. And I've been thinking about that actually ever since. And the reason I've been thinking about it is because what did they call fence sitters? Remember, a bunch of us
yeah.
we were called fence sitters.
Hmm.
I'm proud of my fence sitting. I feel like fence sitting means there are so many things to think about that I can only say these are all the thoughts I have, but I can't tell you how you should think about it because I can just kind of tell you where I'm at and why, and then I don't know. You have to add your own. That is what we talked
Yeah.
about earlier. Um,
I say that too. We talked about this.
that bed that's in there, he is trying to drag that bed out. It's not his bed. You're gonna go in a box. Um, but I think being a fence sitter is awesome, and I've observed, maybe because of the things I say and the way I say, I mean it. Yeah, that's it. Okay, off you go. You got to go in here now. I can't keep this up. It's called management, buddy. There you go. Go take a nap. Um, I feel like just the way I present myself on social media, and I think you probably do the same, I attract people who think the same way. Now, they may or may not say it, they may or may not talk about it,
Yeah.
but they have the interest in somebody who's, looks at the world with perspective. And I really like that. I get a little overwhelmed sometimes when I go on other people's feeds on social media, and I'm just like, who are all these people in the comment section? Because it's so black and white. The world is so black and white for them. This is terrible. This is
Yeah.
wrong. And I just like, wow, that. What does it feel like to go through life so confident and sure? It's like,
It's
I mean,
crazy.
I'm
The horse world
comfortable.
is exactly the same. It's exactly the same. Somebody will be rounding a barrel and running home, and in come the English riders to talk about you're whipping that horse, you're spurring that horse, you're doing all these things. And I'm like, your horse lives in a box and has ulcers. But somehow it's that it, to me, I cannot imagine outside of extreme weather or age or injury. I cannot imagine putting my horse in a stall. I will not do it. And I live in a place where there's bad weather sometimes too. I just, to me, that's a line that I will not, no, absolutely not. I won't even, Layla tries to get me to do it before barrel races so her horse won't get dirty. And I'm, right before it, I'm like, no, no. If he gets dirty, he gets dirty. Put a sheet on him. I don't know what to tell you. Horses live outside. There's things I absolutely would never do that are seen as basic care things,
Yeah.
maybe, or basic writing things in the English world. Um, but there's this sort of mentality that if you ride Western, you're like a balanced, you're like it said, it's comparable. If you ride Western, you're old school, you're mean to animals, and my experience has been the exact opposite. It's been, not that there's not, people that are, I think there's people on both sides, but my experience has actually been in the Western world, horses are allowed to be horses much more. Like there's not this obsession with their, like their pop. But I'm going into a place I shouldn't go, but that's what I've noticed, that there seems to be this exact same kind of feeling as in the dog world of, you do it differently than me, I'm going to come in, and they may have never done any of these Western things. A perfect example of that is the rodeo. I was at, once again, at a rodeo this weekend. Oh, I did something with my hand and it told me, like, you can do hand gestures. I was at a rodeo in Kingman, Kansas with Layla, and I was sitting next to someone that was asking me to explain the purpose of the events. Not because they thought they were mean, or they just literally had never, didn't understand. And I was like, thank you for asking. And I began to explain, like, you eat meat, right? And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, me too. Well, that meat comes from somewhere, and it comes from ranching. And, I explained the process of where I would hope people are getting their meat from, not mass factories, things like that. And that we should be supporting these ranchers and things like that. And the rodeo is the highlight of the ranchers' skills and the people that work cattle and that live this lifestyle. And it has a lot of meaning and purpose. They're team roping because that's how you catch them. and you're doing things very quickly because these are not domesticated animals. These are cattle. They're livestock. They don't like humans. They don't want to be our friends. They don't, none of that. That's not what that is. And so the faster you are, the more compassionate you are when you deal with them because you get in and you get out and then it's over. And so it really is, it's a highlighting of the skills that it takes to be a person wrangling in that industry. And I'm at a lot of rodeos and I don't really ever see anything that I'm like, that's outrageous. I have not seen that. I've seen things I maybe wouldn't have handled that way, but I wasn't that person and I wasn't in the moment on a horse that they spend all their time on and I've never seen in my life. So I let that stuff go because I'm not on the horse. It's happening very quickly. But the vitriol in the comments section about the way that we are making decisions is, you know that's a deep thing. That's a deep thing. I don't know where exactly I'm trying to. It's much bigger than just a debate about differences. It's like this need to shame other humans, or I've done it too. I've done it, so I'm not,
Yeah, we,
but what is that?
well, in group signaling, right? The need to belong.
Yeah,
We're
well,
huge.
yeah.
And in our local communities, you actually know the players, so you're not nearly as brutal, right? But online, you
Right.
don't know the players. So it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to be brutal, and if you're looking for belonging. But we do seem to be in a place where we're very black and white thinking because the online world encourages that. So the
Right.
loudest voices tend to be the ones that have strong opinions. I'm a loud voice, you're a loud voice, but of a different type. I'm not really
Yeah.
trying to persuade people of anything. I'm just saying, here are things I see around me, and make of it what you will. And I'm pretty
Yeah.
comfortable that I've gotten to that point. Why don't you go out then? Huh? My thoughts are being really kind of bad today. I'm sorry. But um, and I just think that it's easier to be comfortable if you feel like you belong. But the worry I always have, and this is what I always tell people, if you have a group that you feel strongly about, positive reinforcement training, balance training, whatever, and if you look to them when a question comes up, because you're not sure how you're supposed to feel about it. So let's say somebody starts talking about structure and you're a new positive reinforcement trainer. And you think, oh, structure sounds like a good thing. And you look to your friend who says, structure's bad. It means dogs sitting on cots all day. And then you go, oh, okay, structure's bad, right?
Mm.
So then you start parroting it, right? And then you learn all the things. Over
Yes.
time, you learn
Oh,
all the things you're not
yes.
supposed to say, you're supposed to think, whatever. You learn all the things, and then somebody asks you a very logical question, like, well, what about if the dog is about to make a bad choice? Do you still let him make choice? But you learn that choice was good, structure is bad. Now you're in a pickle because even if your brain is like, oh, wait a second, that's actually an interesting point. You can't say that because you've learned to belong to your group that you can only have one
Yep.
opinion.
Right.
And then you hearing and seeing very strange arguments. And a lot of the arguments in the dog world, I'm just now, they lack logic.
Yeah.
They're so extreme in their thinking. They're so kind of vested in the community over common sense, like over thought, that you just end up
Mhm.
with very um, strange things. And I actually feel sorry
Yeah.
for people who are so vested that they're no longer allowed to have an opinion because they might lose what they have. What they
Yeah.
have is a black and white group, and you're not allowed to have
Yeah.
any shades of gray in a black and white
Mm-hmm.
group. So you'll literally walk away from all your friends if you
Mm-hmm.
express a different opinion publicly in a
Yeah.
space that's not allowed. What I've
Mm-hmm.
learned over the last couple of years is that it's exceptionally freeing to, from the beginning, from the get-go, say what you want to say, no matter who you offend. Here's why. Over time, you'll offend this one and they'll yell at you, and you'll offend that one and they'll yell at you. At the end of the day, all the extremes just walk away from you because you're not one of them. And what's
Right.
left is pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool, group of people who also have lots of ways of looking at things. Otherwise, they got rid of you. If somebody, my 20 thoughts of the last 3 weeks, if all 20 thoughts had to align with a specific group, they probably didn't. And once that
Yeah.
group knows it, they walk away from me. And it really
Hmm.
does. It's sort of a self cleaning process. And what that does is gives me freedom because
Yeah, I
I'm,
do it all the time. I like to do like a whole storyline where I just, especially my favorite time to do it is when I have a viral video and my account's like growing. And then I'm like, ooh, this is some good momentum. I should say something really messed up. You know, I should really, I do it all. It's like a compulsion. I don't know. I feel like I've classically conditioned myself to do it because it just, it is true. If you say something that you think is an inner thought that you normally don't say out loud and you finally just say it, watch them run, you know, and then whoever's left are the people that either maybe they disagree with you, but they don't give a shit, or they agree with you, or they, you know, like it's just kind of whatever. There's a lot of, I think a lot of people afraid to say things, and that just breaks my
oh,
heart.
it's
My
huge.
client,
I think people are
my,
very
my Well, there, I think I even in public, my client asked me the other day what she could have done better in a situation. She said that she lives in a busy city. I think she lives in Philly. I can't remember it, but anyway, um, she was waiting to stop, or she stopped to wait for the mailman who was coming out in front of her, and so she's just standing on the sidewalk with her dog, waiting, clearly waiting for the mailman. And this woman just came up behind her and walked right by her and her dog lunged at the lady. And she said, and then the lady took out her phone and filmed her. And she said, what could I have done better in that situation? And I was like, a series of expletives about that woman. I said, you sometimes some of my clients need to learn that people are, I'm trying to say this without saying cuss words. I I said that lady be damned. Didn't say it like that, but I was like, there was no reason for that woman to have done that to you. And sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes people are just being assholes. And you have to recognize that there's nothing you could have done other than hold your dog. And that lunge that happened or whatever, it means nothing. It means it is not a relapse. It is not a this. It is not a that. It's that lady walked up behind you. Maybe she didn't realize it, maybe whatever, but people are really, really, really hard on themselves about things that don't make any sense and then confused about the rest of it because of social media. I see this sort of collective, like, they're very, very hard on themselves. What could I
yes.
have done better? I know that I messed up. And I'm like, what you could do better is just maybe calm down and be nice to yourself.
That's
Um,
hard though. When somebody takes out their camera, I would be
oh
just
God.
who does that? Like
Uh,
I know who does, but it's just like
yes, that's why I used cuss words to her because I was like, who, that is inappropriate. If I
that's
see another woman out on the street and she is struggling in any way, and if I think I can help, or maybe from a distance even, I'm going to help her. I'm not going to walk up on her, make her life more miserable, and then take out my phone and film her. Sometimes I wish we could still smack people,
I know,
you know?
but wrong. So think about where is that person coming from that would bring them joy? Because to me,
Oh,
that would be so.
oh.
Get pleasure out of harming another person is like the worst thing I can imagine. So I mean, since I was 10, you know what I mean? Like as an adult, I'd really like to believe that's way off my radar. So I would just be so unbelievably sad to see that there are people in the world who that's all they have.
Well, today I was riding my horse down a road that's like, it's a dirt road, but for whatever reason, at some certain times, it's very, very busy and people do not slow down. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if they think it's a thoroughfare or whatever, but there is a property that's back, it has a nice, really big, nice gate and it goes way back. But along the road, there's a tree line, and then they have a little patch of grass that just goes like a trail along the other side on their property, but there's no fence. And when the cars are really, really, really like busy and they just go by fast, they don't slow down for me or nothing. I'm worried about rocks. I always step off onto that person's property. Again, there's no fence, there's no, there's no signs that are like no trespassing, nothing like that. So today the road was really busy and I crossed the road and walked up on, but I stay as close to the tree line as possible so I'm not like disturbing anything on their property. And pretty soon this car comes by and they slow down, which isn't totally unusual. Sometimes people just want to ask me a question or say hi or whatever. And so I got a little closer to the car and it was an old hatchback yellow Ford Focus. It was like very serial killer-ish. I don't know why, but it just was. And the man is probably in his late 50s, I would say. And he says something to me and I take out my AirPod and he says, "So do you just ride on anyone's property?" And he said it just like that, really loudly and really rudely, which is, I don't know. Anyway. And I was like, No, there's a lot of cars and there was that big truck coming and they just, people do not slow down. And so I came up here and he's like, "Oh yeah, people go really fast down this road." And said a couple other things to me. And then I said, "Well, I wouldn't just come up here. I just felt like it was more safe. And if my neighbor were out riding their horse or walking their dog, I would expect that they would know that if they felt unsafe, they could walk up onto my property to get off of the road. And I would want them to do that." And his demeanor changed like that. And he's like, "Well," and he said something else to me. And I said, "Do you own this property?" And he goes, "As a matter of fact, I do." And I said, "Well, I would love to thank the owner of the property. So that's lovely that you're here, because every time this road's busy, I always walk up on here because I feel so much safer." And I said, "But I'm going to go. I'm going to get off the property." And as I went to get off, probably 10 cars came by fast, driving all crazy. And I'm trying to like go on the road. And he's like, "Actually, why don't you just go ahead and walk on the property?" And so I did, and he watched me the whole way. Like he was still being whatever he is, but it just like, it would never occur to me to say anything to anybody that was walking along my property line on the road like that, other than to wave or say hi to them, or I don't know. I just, there is a spirit. There is a little spirit in America. It is a little, like an angry little troll that's like assuming that everyone is doing the worst, or assuming that everyone, I mean, I wasn't offended. I didn't take it personal. But I'm glad that I didn't blow up on him and
Oh,
that I
you handled
just,
it perfectly because he went home and had to face the fact that he was an
yeah,
asshole. So
like,
of the day, you come out looking really, really good when you handle something like that. You educated him, you were kind, you offered to leave. He got to see how being a jerk was putting your safety at risk. You
yeah,
did. And then he's like, okay, so that wasn't a great idea. But then he goes home and he's got to live with himself.
yeah,
Now some people we know they
yeah.
don't on anything, but some people do. You know, if you can, I think those are amazing ways to handle it.
My
And I think
parents have had a hell neighbor for a couple decades now.
that's
Well, I think it's probably been about 15 years. I mean, to the point of where they had to install cameras. My elderly parents, um, like, I don't know that they'll ever know what happened. I don't know they'll ever know why that man hates them. I'm not. We have no idea. Uh, I've never met a person that disliked my father in my life. I've never come across a single human being that has ever had a bad thing to say about my dad. It's just not something that's done. He just isn't, anyway. Um but this guy would throw chemicals in their lawn, like the whole half one side of their lawn was barren for years because this man would throw things. It was just really bizarre. So There's a lot of weird neighbors out there. They have a nice plush yard now because after they got the cameras, they caught him throwing stuff over the fence, and the cops were like,
Wow.
listen.
Wow.
Uh-oh,
That's so
somebody's freaking out because they want to see Burrito. Not kidnapped. Burrito's alive and well. They wanted proof of life for Burrito.
pretty happy
Wow,
with
we
pretty
talked.
really happy. The others got locked up, so
Yeah,
he's
so
left. The good.
he's feeling like he's the favorite is what it is.
Yeah. So we were going to talk about euthanasia. We kind of did in a roundabout sort of
A
way.
little, yeah.
A little.
What would you say? What happens when you tell a client what you think and they disagree with you and they opt for behavioral euthanasia?
I've never had it happen because I don't work in that sphere. The closest would be, so when I was teaching, every once in a while, for sure, I had people who had a lot of resistance because I approach things so differently. Like traditional obedience is don't let dogs sniff, right? So if they sniff, you pop them.
Mm,
And I would say, well, why don't we tell your dog to sniff and then tell them when we want them to do something else that's incompatible? And those kind of statements, often you can kind of see that change in their face of like, I mean, it's almost like you just said, burn the Bible. It's intense, like some
yeah,
people take it so serious. Um, and so, if I think it through, often I ignore it. If it's somebody I'm going to be seeing over time, I just ignore their hardness and say, well, here are the choices, and here's my logic, here's my reasoning. And my assumption is they're not paying me to give me grief. That doesn't mean they don't give me grief. It's just that they're not paying me to give me grief. They really are struggling themselves with what I'm saying, and they're having a hard time with it. At the end of the day, though, it almost makes me wonder if when you run into that with the client, it's what they were really looking for was somebody to say, to give them permission to make a different decision. So the decision might have been euthanasia, the decision might have been rehoming. What I would say, the elephant in the room that so many of us don't discuss. I can't tell you how many times people have said, well, the dog's not horrible, but it's not a suitable dog for this client. So, your options are you could rehome the dog, you could work through it, whatever. It amazes me how often people suggest rehoming. And the reason it amazes me is that often the dog that was just described is going to be exceptionally difficult to rehome. Not because it's so extreme, but because most people who are looking for a new dog aren't looking for a dog that's going to require, let's call it, ongoing management and effort. They're looking for something a little different. And I feel like we're being a little disingenuous with suggestions of rehoming. Um,
yeah,
the dogs that need to be rehomed are when the 75-year-old woman got a dog who's too big, is now afraid of the
yes,
dog because maybe it's her hip.
yes,
That dog is highly
yeah,
rehomable because the issue isn't really the dog. The issue is truly the situation. But when the situation is such that it will be replicated in the vast majority of homes, like my dog is wonderful, except he likes to escape. That's not a minor thing. So now you're saying, okay, so what's left for this dog who likes to escape? And the dog I'm thinking of in my head then kills cats in the neighborhood. So it's not a minor thing to have a dog that escapes over your 6-foot fences and then kills cats when it gets out because somebody else owned that cat. So, well, I need to rehome this dog. And I see this in Craigslist a lot with varying
hmm
degrees of information provided for the problem. Or I like this one of livestock guardian dogs that are being rehomed because they kill livestock. Well, okay, but you have to understand what's the purpose of a livestock guardian dog and who wants one? Well, people who have livestock. And a
yeah. It
lot of
should be who wants one.
they're very poorly suited to many other environments. And so I feel like we skirt around the
Yeah,
issue.
they're lining the shelters of in LA,
Oh,
Great
absolutely. That's
Pyrenees.
They sit in the shelters just like the Malinois, just like the
Yeah,
Husky. And I feel like we often just skirt around the issue of euthanasia by saying, well, sometimes this dog needs to be rehomed. And what I want to say is, can we have a more honest conversation here? Because the dog you just described, who lives on medication, hides under the bed, has
hmm
separation anxiety, it may not be aggressive, but it's suffering and it's not a good candidate for almost any home. So then you end up putting it in some rescue. Finally, somebody takes it, puts it in a foster home, and the dog 4 years later is still in the foster home,
yeah,
who never wanted to own it, right? That's a whole nother thing. You're using up
yeah.
your foster. But I do think that the euthanasia conversation suffers for lack of honesty on many dimensions. Like Is it acceptable for a person to simply state, I had a different vision of a dog in my family, and the vision is ruined, that what I actually have is so far from what I was hoping. I'm not saying Lassie, but the situation I have, the dog I have, the resource guarding, the separation anxiety
Yeah.
is such that it doesn't meet my needs and interest in owning a dog anymore. And that's legitimate. Even if that same dog in my household, I could say I could probably do a little rearranging. Some people are extreme. They don't want to have any problems to deal with. But the good news is those people, those dogs are rehomable. Once you're in a situation where the dog is not, the person's not happy, even though the dog can be helped, and the dog is not a good candidate for rehoming because nobody's going to want to just take on these problems, at that point we need to talk about euthanasia. And that's an interesting dilemma, because it's not that the dog needs to be euthanized. The problem is that there's only so many homes that want problem dogs.
And
And
that's that right there is a conversation people don't want to have. They do not want to hear. They don't, because within that conversation they have to take accountability. They
yes,
just have
on
to.
people always go to the extremes. Well, the dog bit 6 people, took a kid's face off, and all. I'm like, why don't we just talk about what usually happens, which is much more moderate? It's a dog that can't be walked because it's lunging, it's big, it's hard to have people in the house because of the dog's behavior. So the dog can be crated, and the dog has some issues with one of the children in the house, so it's causing some problems there, and can't be left outside when people come because it barks a lot. So that would be, I would say, not an unusual package
Mm-hmm.
of problems that are making the dog unpleasant for the home. They don't love this dog anymore. It's the dog has become a problem, and it's not a severe situation, but it is a package that most other people don't want to have. A dog that they cannot walk, that barks a lot, that takes a lot of homes off right there. It's very complicated to have people in, and maybe a little bit of separation anxiety or whatever. What do you do about those dogs? Nobody talks about those dogs because it's an ugly conversation to admit that you think you have the right to a life that you had in mind when a living
Mm-hmm.
creature is involved,
Mm-hmm.
and there actually is no alternative. There's not a rescue that's going to want this dog, not lightly. That some will, but maybe you don't have access to one. If it goes to a shelter and you're honest, and if the shelter's honest, it's going to be a hard dog to adopt out, especially if it's one of the breeds like my breed, Malinois. Some that I
Yeah.
don't. I love my breed, and many of them, the ones that are in the shelter, could live in my home fine because of my management situation. But realistically, most of them will be euthanized or should be euthanized, because if they were already in a home, it'd be different if that home wanted to take it on. But they're not highly adoptable dogs, um, which doesn't mean they're
Yeah.
dangerous.
And then we can add on to that pit bulls.
Yeah, I never talk about pit bulls because I have so little experience with them that I don't feel like I have a sense. I have a sense
Yeah.
of breed. I get the problem with my breed.
Yeah.
I don't get the
I
problem
have
with
said
pit.
to many people, like, just make sure that you're not a Labrador person. If you're a Labrador person and you're a golden retriever type of lifestyle person, and you want a dog that can just go around and probably won't bite anybody and will be, let the kids flop on it and do whatever, please do not get a pit bull. Please don't. If you, if you, I, I feel like I have such a free life with my dog. I feel like I have a beautiful, with all of my dogs, that I've had this open, adventurous life with them. I have felt no limitations with these breeds at all. But I've noticed that the way I manage them is outrageously different than anyone else I've ever met in my life. I mean, at all. Not like my dog trainer friends now, but I've never met a lay person that manages dogs the way that I do. Um,
When they don't want to, if they do. If they're
yeah,
doing it, it's because
I
it's
mean,
not making them
not
happy.
everybody would want to do that.
No. They wanted a pet.
Yeah, they want a pet and something that doesn't require such a high level of, like, almost mastery over management. But I don't know. To me, to my personality, to my dogs, to my clients, it seems seems to suit everybody very well because it's a very easy style of management. But you do have to do stuff, and you do have to take your dog on walks and have a relationship with it. And if you're willing to do that, it's actually very easy. But if you're not, it would seem like a lot, I'm sure.
Which kind of gets me back to where we started this conversation. That's why my primary mission is to help people fall in love with their dogs. Because if people fall in love with their dogs, they want to do
Yeah,
those things. You can't
yeah.
shame people
Hmm.
into taking their dog for walks. You're just creating resentment. But if you can convince them that a dog is unbelievably amazing
Yeah,
and you have one, then that's a different, you set up for a relationship that will weather the challenges because the dog, it becomes important.
yeah,
And if there was one thing I would love to get across to the positive reinforcement community, that's that their focus shouldn't be on telling people how they should do things because of the dog's well-being. Their focus should be on helping people want to do things in the kindest possible way.
yeah. Leading by example. Yeah.
That's where change takes place. Otherwise, as soon as you walk out the door, they go right back to what they were
Yeah.
doing before
Hmm.
because it's working. So it all comes down to this: the root versus the symptom. The symptom of how
Yeah.
people treat dogs is a function of the root. How do they see dogs? So we want
Mm.
people to see dogs as the little amazing creatures they are, and then they will naturally be kinder, just like the way we see children. Generally,
Yeah.
when you have, especially when you've had them, you start to be fascinated by them. They're
Hmm.
very, very interesting. Watching a
Hmm.
small child grow, the infant to 2 months to 6 months, and then you get educated about, oh my gosh, that's what's happening here. We have object permanence. I hid the object, and he looked for it. That's
Yeah.
so part of falling in love with a child, an infant, is wonder and watching this process unfold. How can we do more of that in the dog? Not telling people you should love your child, you should want to spend time with them, you should want to go to the school and watch the play. It's more about the incentive of, oh, it's so cool to have that opportunity, and that little shift would probably help dogs with problems get more
Yeah.
commitment from the owners. But once somebody comes in and is just really looking for you to give them permission to opt out, I don't I don't know how much you can do at that point. I think that's a hard place. You can try, but it's a
Well,
hard.
yeah, I mean, when it, and if I disagree with someone about it, I left it at I don't have to live with that dog. So I'm telling you, in my professional opinion, what I think it will take to recover this dog as best as I see it with the information I have. If you do not feel like you're up for that, then make the decision that you think is right for you. Because I'm not paying your bills. I'm not your mom. I don't have to live with that dog. And as much as I may disagree with your decision, that's the reality of it.
You just lay out
And
the
that's where we left it.
yeah.
She's upset with me because she said I had said so, I think this is relevant for other people to hear. She said that I had said something that made her feel bad and hurt her feelings, and I told her that I am aware that some of the things that I have to say sometimes to people are hard to hear. I try to say them as kindly as I can, but I will not. If we're going to have the conversation, we got to have the whole conversation, not just the parts that feel good. And the whole conversation is that we learned from this, most likely, that we need to choose our dogs based off what we want out of our life and not off of emotional impulse because of a rescue. It's a slippery slope to being mismatched and feeling like you're in hell. And then
That
the consequence of
that
that is that a dog loses its life
that
that may have very well done okay in a different home. We will never know. We'll
that
never know.
conversation is so important. And I think actually
Yeah.
the reality is society has kind of set up this, oh my God, you're a wonderful human being if you rescue a dog. But the part that gets left out is, and you are a wonderful human being because you might be turning your life upside down for 15 years. So you're not getting all those kudos for free. Like, depending on the
Mhm.
dog, you may actually be the Florence Nightingale of the
Right.
dog world. That's amazing. But you don't get that for free. You don't go get a rescue that has issues and then somehow the trainer comes in and solves the issues and now you just get the I
And
rescued the
now
dog thing. No,
you
no,
just
no,
get
no.
the accolades. Yeah. Yeah.
and if that's a package you want or need, hey, that's awesome, because there's a lot of dogs who need you out there. But I do think, I mean, so much damage has been done because people think it's all in how you raise them. So all you have to do is love them a little more, and you got to fix them right up. I was looking at a thread on a friend's thread on social media, and I actually made a comment. The dog was displaying very dangerous behavior, and I was reading through the comments, and the number of people were like, well, always goes out on a muzzle, keep it on a leash. And I finally made a comment. I said, I'm scared of the comments in this thread. Muzzles off, doors get left open. This is a dog who I think will pull an infant out of a stroller
Yeah.
and kill it. If that's what I saw.
Yeah.
And you got this comment thread of people who are living in some fantasy land. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it scares me, your number of people in our society who really don't understand what it means when you have a dog with certain tendencies. And not about training.
Right.
And it's not about management, because recognizing the possibility of failure, it's about asking yourself, if there is failure, what are the ramifications?
Yes.
And with
Yes.
that, what are the odds of
Yeah.
failure? Because there's no point in being ridiculous, like saying, well, if the dog jumped out of the window at 70 miles, don't be stupid. Like, logically,
Like the real
look at it.
things. Yeah.
What are the odds that management will fail in this circumstance? And you got kids in the house right there. You're going to have failure. There's no way a door's not going to get left open, right? So what are the odds? And second, what's the worst case scenario? And I actually did have a dog, had that conversation with someone. I did send a dog back to the breeder, and this person had told me a story, which was pretty horrific, involving a 3-year-old. And that was the day I asked myself, if this particular dog ever got out of my house,
Yeah. I remember you
got down
saying
the
that to
road,
me.
and my blood ran cold,
Yeah. Like
and I knew
what
it
would actually really
was.
happen. Yeah.
Could it happen? Probably. Could it? Yes. Probably not. But if it did,
Yeah.
how bad could it be? And that was it for me. And I think maybe people
Yeah.
don't necessarily ask themselves that question. How bad are we talking? Because when your Yorkie gets out of the door and chases down a child, or okay, so somebody got a little blood on their hands, right? But a Yorkie is not a Rottweiler. A Rottweiler is not
Right.
a Belgian. A Belgian is not a pit bull. You're talking about big, powerful, strong dogs, and the rules are different in my world by a lot.
Yeah.
You know. So
I have always taken the stance that all dogs bite, all dogs are dangerous. Um, Doors open, management fails always, even way before I knew that that was probably a good stance to take. I just, from a very early age, I had these dogs. And so I was terrified that they wouldn't be trained and they would hurt someone. I could not get over that. I don't know. I really don't even know where that came from. I didn't really have any experiences with pit bulls. I think it was, I didn't want to mess up. And so then that just carried over and over into each dog. But I assume that every dog walking down the street has behavioral problems. Every single dog. I do not pass dogs on the street unless I give a wide berth, or I'm on a bike. If we're going quickly, that's generally a little bit better for everybody, and I can make space faster. But there's just things that I do not do with my dog that people think is commonplace and is the marker of having a great dog. Walking dogs pass each other on the sidewalk like this. I never do that.
oh,
And I would
I,
argue that my dog is really well trained,
I
so there's so many bizarre things because people are still stuck thinking that we're in a time that we are not in. When I was growing up, women did not have pit bulls in mass. They that I never I can't even remember. I was the first woman I ever saw with a pit bull in my life. Ever. I never would have seen. And now it's like you could go to any given apartment complex and there's five women in there with pit bulls. It and as a person who has the breed and has had it for many years and has helped train more than I could count, I have very particular opinions about those dogs being in the city. I have to be very careful about what I say because it makes people so mad. And for me, for a person who is a breed ambassador, I would not choose to live in the city and have that breed of dog. The same as I wouldn't a hound dog or a Catahoula or a healer. I just, I don't think it's appropriate. That
So it's not that
doesn't that
saying,
doesn't mean people don't can't ever do it, and there's not people doing it successfully with dogs that are fulfilled. For the average person, like you and I were talking about, the average person, that's not going to
so it's
happen.
like it's not even about the breeds. It really isn't. It's about the right person for the right dog in the right
Yeah,
circumstance.
that's true. Yeah,
And
because
we
there's
really
so
have
many
not, we
examples.
have not communicated that.
Mm-hmm.
That we just haven't. We think it's
Yeah.
cute. We like the breed. They're misunderstood or whatever. I don't think my breed is misunderstood. Let me tell you, I think they're actually well understood. I wish more
Yeah.
people understood. Not a great pet for most circumstances.
I
Some of
don't
them are amazing.
think a thing is misunderstood about pit bulls either. I don't know what people are talking about when they say that. I'm just like, I understand very well what's going on, and it's unfortunate, but there's not much to misunderstand about a dog that's prone to dog aggression.
Well, I
I
will say this: you better be strong enough to manage it on the equipment you're walking it on in the
yeah.
circumstance that you're in. If
Mhm.
you got that, if that's what's working for you, that's fine. But just look, everybody else has some rights too. So whatever dog you
Yeah.
have, whatever breed, whatever size, knowing what you know about that dog, when you take it outside, are you taking it places that when the worst case scenario happens, if that's reasonable, like again,
Mhm.
is it a reasonable worst case scenario? Is it going to be okay? Is it going to be something you can live with, right? At the end of the day, what results are, and I'll tell you, thinking that way drives a lot of my decisions about where I take my
Yeah.
dogs. And it has nothing to do with my dogs.
Yeah.
It has to do with other people, other people's dogs. Like I saw a park, I was driving by the other day and I saw a park I didn't know. And I love the park because it's on a busy road on one side. And that just guarantees that there's not going to be off leash dogs in that
Yeah. True.
park. Yeah, it was a
Hmm.
beautiful big park, but I know there won't be out of control dogs there. And that
Hmm.
means, oh, awesome. That's a perfect place for me and my dogs because I
Yeah.
can in there and anybody else who's there, I can pretty much guarantee it's going to be a good scenario. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate to think that way, but I don't resent it anymore. I'm just like, this is the life I lead. These are the dogs I've chosen.
Hmm.
They just don't do well with too much randomness. So
Yeah,
this is
I
safe.
just watch people walking their dogs, and the labradoodles are meeting each other, and the people with Goldens are stopping and chatting, and I'm like, I cannot imagine doing that. And Enzo likes other dogs and people, but he has an intensity about everything that he does that is not for on leash greetings like that. It just,
I've not had
I don't know.
I've not had that dog in 40 years. Not since I was a kid and I had Shelties. They got
Mhm.
along. It's
Yeah.
fine. You drag them along, and you got
Yeah,
dogs I've had since
that's true. That's a good breed for that.
they're just not that kind of dog. I had a couple guide dog puppies I raised, a golden and a lab. Happy, happy, happy. Nicest dogs ever. I'll tell you though, I'm kind of heading back in that direction as I'm getting older. I want
Yeah.
to. I'm the border collie. It's a nice middle because um it's a softness. So like if something bad's going to happen, it's going to happen to him rather than my dog doing it to someone else.
Yeah.
And you know what?
I know what you mean. Yeah, because I have a dog that if something bad happens, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
He's not going to be the victim. He's going to be the criminal.
And I'm not I would rather own the victim than the criminal. And I got me a
Yeah.
he's in a bad
Yeah,
spot.
I know. I know what you mean by that.
So this place, and every once in a while I'll be looking at some kids game like soccer or something, and you know the people bring their dogs and their dogs are kind of wandering around there. I'm like, wow, I've never had I mean, what is that like?
They're at the
The
rodeo,
border
like
is
the
close.
it's so dog friendly at the rodeo. And when I say so, I mean you go to sit in your spot at the bleachers and there's a corgi, more dachshunds than you've ever seen in your life. Horse people or wiener dog people. There's dachshund, three dachshund puppies, two border collies walk past you, all within a minute of each other. And nary a fight.
Nope.
Not a single
I've had good luck.
incident.
I've had good luck with my dog at horse events
Yeah,
because I used
I mean, they're just,
dogs are under control. General, they may be off leash and wandering, but they're just like, yeah, they're just kind of doing their thing. It's not a concern.
Well, I noticed the breeds are very common at horse shows or at rodeos like that. You've got a few stock dogs, lots of healers,
Yeah.
corgis, dachshunds, and then there was a couple basset hounds. I don't know what they were doing there, but they were having a good time. So it's a pretty. You can see that there's, and then pointers. Oh my God, they do so great around horses. So you can see that there's types of dogs that are really
Yeah.
like affable and more amenable to these high stimulation environments. And you guys, pit bulls ain't it. At full arousal, pit bulls are designed to bring the hammer down. And you just don't want that in a family type of setting. And people are like, you're telling people not to get pit bulls. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm saying. That is exactly what I've been saying for 20 years, because there are some of us who are very serious about the breed and really put a lot of time and effort into making a good dog. And the rest of y'all are ruining it for us and have been for like 20 plus years now. This has been a problem with no end in sight. It's
Well, I'm
unfortunate.
joining you soon because in the last 10 years, nobody even knew what my dog was 10 years ago.
Ooh, good
And
point. Yeah, nobody knew what mouse
it's
were.
just, it's heartbreaking. It really is. It's heartbreaking to see it. And it's not going to get better. Not for a while, because there's always the new and up and coming scary dog.
I
And
know.
it looks like it's mine.
And I'm like, oh,
Heartbreaking.
what's it going to be next?
Yeah.
What's it going to be next?
Well,
Well, sorry, that was such a
on that,
Debbie Downer live,
on that
everyone.
depressing note, we should wrap up. I think we
We
got a
should.
little conversation in there.
We did. I think it was good, and I think it was a good conversation to have since we didn't have a guest, because we don't want to be that melancholy when our guests are here. So,
Yeah, they'd be like,
like,
what? What? We want them to show up when we're going to talk about like April Fool's Day. Hey, okay, so maybe next year we should try to do an April Fool's Day podcast, but don't tell people it's an April Fool's Day podcast. Has anybody
I would really, really love if we did
ever,
that. I would
no,
love.
that? So we can totally do it next. I actually, before I put out my April Fool's yesterday, I notified a few of my more gullible friends. I said,
Denise announces a pregnancy.
I'm informed this year, so I'm telling you it's coming because I don't want to catch you flat-footed.
Oh my God. Yeah, we'll have to come up with something really elaborate. I would love that.
Oh, we will. I love that. Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it.
Okay. Oh, smile so we can have our. We got it. All right, everybody. Have a good night. And don't forget to come to Dogs Anonymous tonight at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. your time.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.